2024 has been a wild year for champions released in MCoC. Many people call it one of the worst years recently, and while I do disagree with that, I do think it is interesting how some characters have shifted more towards defensive values than attacking values, specifically when it comes to like less champions released this year that are focused on just being general kill everything and battlegrounds type champions, right? So I decided I want to rank every character released this year outside of like the Deadpooloids and a couple like boss characters. You're gonna see like Glykon and Orochi on this list. I'm going to rank them all based on attacking values only. The reason I'm doing this is because if I was to include defensive values, this would basically just be a Battlegrounds tier list, and that's not what I'm trying to make. I'm trying to make a rankings on every single character for every single game mode. Because I value basically every game mode in this game. I value Battlegrounds, Alliance War, Everest content like Eternity of Pain, Everest content like Necropolis. The only game modes where I'm like, yeah, I don't think I really care about the relevance of character for would be like Alliance Quest, Incursions, and Arena. Like even questing, I do value some questing abilities for a character, and I know I'm not alone in that. Because there are a lot of other people who do value questing type abilities for a character. So every game mode's going to be included except for those 3 that I mentioned specifically when it comes to these rankings. And again, this is based off of purely attack. I do not care about a champion's defensive values in this ranking at all. So Bullseye and Serpent obviously aren't going to be nearly as high as they would on some other people's lists, right? So that's how this ranking is going to go. Another thing I do need to mention before I start is that I have played almost every single character in the list except for the champions released in October and later, aside from Dazzler. So I have not played Screamer Jack, I have not played Spiral, and I am not including Isophene or Deathless Thanos on the list, or Deathless Shield, because no one has played those yet, unless you got really lucky on Isophene from early access or like the stream giveaway type thing. So, no Isophene, no Deathless Shield or Deathless Thanos, and that being said, let's get into the list. Alright, so I'm actually moving over to a tier list that I found thanks to the YouTuber Rebello, who made this tier list for the 2024 champs. And luckily for me, this also doesn't have Isophene, Deathless She-Hulk, or Deathless Thanos in it either, so we don't have to worry about ranking them. But I went ahead and made my own tiers, which, you know, I made as many as I felt needed, because I do want to try to rank these characters individually and not necessarily by tier. So if I put Dazzler and Count Nefaria in Busted Champ, whichever one would be the leftmost, I think is better than the one on the rightmost. So this is going to be like a ranking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kind of thing, rather than just grouping them together in tiers, but still we do have the tiers just for a bit more clarity. So we do have Undeniably Broken, Busted Champ, Strong, Pretty Good, Decent, Mid, Bad, Unplayable, and Won't Rank, which I'm pretty sure I don't even need the Won't Rank anymore, the Won't Rank tier anymore, due to not having Isophene and the other ones. So, that being said, let's get started with what I think is the worst character of the year, and that is Silver Sable. And this is probably a cliche at this point, because like that's everyone's pick for the worst character of the year. And I'd like to try and defend her a little bit, but I just can't do that because I see no purpose for this character anywhere. Not in BG's, not in Alliance War, not in Everest content, not in Necropolis, maybe in questing. Like, she could have a few good questing values, but like, I just don't see any meta defenders that she's taking very well. I mean, I guess Photon kind of counts, but like, it's really hard to be a skill champ, and just try to be a strong science counter when Photon is the only good science defender in the game outside of Thing, which also Sable can't take Thing because he's shock immune, right? So she only has like one meta defender she's good for, and she doesn't have the abilities to hold up in long-form content, I think. She doesn't have the utility for Alliance War, the damage for Battlegrounds. I just don't see any purpose in this character whatsoever. Hopefully that'll change after the buff, but I think she's like the only champion who I am not optimistic for a rebalance, because I think even if she gets rebalanced, she's still not going to be great. Arcade and Northstar are getting rebalanced the same month as her. I am way more optimistic for those two. I think those two can become good characters. I don't think Sable can, just because of the way her kit is designed. Unfortunate, but it's the reality of how this champion is. So, we move on to the next worst character, and that is going to be Deathless Vision. He sucks. I'm sorry to anyone who likes him. I genuinely can't figure out where to use him. I think I've sent him to Alliance War like once outside of the season he was Tactic Attack for one fight, just because I needed a player to use a robot and they had a rank 2 Deathless Vision, so I was like, why the hell not? But I just don't think he is very good at all. I'm not gonna talk much about him. I just think his power control is really bad. I think his damage is pretty bad still, and I don't think his heal block is valuable enough for his phase. I mean, hopefully my mind can be changed. I think it could be changed, but I don't know. And then keeping on the Deathless theme, King Groot is next. This one might be a bit more controversial, putting King Groot this low. But outside of like Path 3 and Alliance War, I don't see him being anything useful for Alliance War. And Path 3 Section 1 too. Like, I don't think he's going to be good for Path 3 Section 2 either. I don't think he's good enough for BGs, especially in comparison to the Cosmic class, which there are two classes in BGs, which are just like general nuke classes, and Cosmic is one of them. Science, I think, is the other. So you can't just be a generic tech counter for BGs but not have stellar damage. That's just kind of the reality of the Science and Cosmic classes specifically. And his damage isn't that bad, but it's just okay. I do think he is going to be more useful for long-form content than a lot of the characters on this list are, but I'm not sure yet. We'll see how he performs for the Necropolis Deathless Challenge. I think if he does well for the Necropolis Deathless Challenge, he might move up in the tier list. I don't see Vision being good for that challenge, but again, it's also possible. So, yeah, I'm going to put him in bad and not unplayable. In fact, I think Vision's going to go there too. Yeah, I think that's it. And that's also going to be the end of the bad tier, because I think the worst characters left are going to go in mid or higher. And then the next character I'm going to put on the list, this one hurts, because I genuinely think this is a very cool champion. It's Leader. I think he is very cool in his design. I like what they were going for by doing the exact opposite of Hulk. Hulk is a mindless nuke. Leader is a champion who is designed to be a utility champion at the end of the day. The problem with Leader is that there is another character released this year who does what Leader does, mostly at least, but with way better damage output. And if Leader's damage output was just fine, then I'd be okay with it, but I think Leader genuinely has the worst damage the entire year. And I'm not a person who's gonna like downgrade a champion who has good utility and just fine damage, because I think fine damage can be fine. I mean, that sounded redundant, but I think fine damage can work for a character. In this case, I think Leader's is so bad that I just don't see anywhere for him to be used, including Alliance War, because I think that's what he was supposed to be really good for. And the only thing I like about him for War that I wouldn't just send another character for is his Steadfast Mystic ability. His Steadfast is a pretty good ability. I genuinely like it, but I also think his severe debuffs are very cool. I really like the mechanic of the severe debuffs, but his damage is just so bad. And again, a lot of the characters on this list aren't going to be ranked low because of their damage. Leader specifically is, because it's just unusable, I think. So, yeah, it's unfortunate because I really like his design. I really like the gimmick they were going for, and I think he would be a really easy rebalance solution. We just don't know the rebalance solution yet because his information should be coming like any day now, actually, him and Patriot. So, after Leader, we move on to Destroyer. Destroyer is interesting because I like his immunities. I like how he's immune to the 2 damage over time debuffs. I like how he's immune to slow. I like how he's immune to armor break and stuff. What I just don't get about him is where he's meant to be played. I don't think he's a Battlegrounds attack champion. I don't think he's a war attack champion. And I don't think he's an Everest Necropolis character at all. What he might be meant to be played for is Eternity of Pain, Autumn of Agony type health pools, but I haven't really seen him go there. So I don't really know why you're meant to play him. And that might just be because he was designed to be more of a defender than anything, which again, defender output is not in these rankings at all. However, I'm not going to hide the fact that some characters are just designed to be defenders and not have a lot of attacking value. And I think that might have just been the design choice for Destroyer. I don't know that, but I don't see him doing anything. And if I had to pick any character this year that I think got scammed in the rebalance period, I think Destroyer would be my pick. Because he should have gotten something. I think every character who didn't get touched at all were fine as is. I think Destroyer is like the only one where I disagree with that. Unfortunate to be Destroyer because I just don't know what you're supposed to use him for, right? So, alright, we move on to the next character on the list, which is going to be Arcade. I'm putting Arcade in decent. You can cry about it if you don't like it. I genuinely think this character is really interesting. I like his auto block and steadfast mechanic, his safety mechanics. I like his immunities. I think they are interesting for war. And if they can make his damage better through his rebalance period, which I think is what they're really trying to do, I think the combination of his immunities and his safety for Alliance War could make him a decent Alliance War attacker. I think improving his damage could make him a decent two-way in Battlegrounds. And also, they're touching his defense mechanics, which could also make him better for BGs. So obviously, none of that has happened yet because he doesn't get rebalanced till January. So I have to rank him based off of his kit now, and I think his kit now is genuinely decent. I think his damage is not as terrible as everyone says. I do think he kind of wants to be awakened for a little bit extra damage output, but if you have Arcade and you want to play him, that might not be the case when he gets buffed. You might not need the SIG as much. We'll have to see. As of now, I genuinely like his immunities. I genuinely like his questing potential, his Alliance War potential. That's about it. In his current state, that's all I can really say. He does have some really interesting utility in his like Game Wizard abilities where he gets like to turn off true accuracy. His damage and debuffs can't have their duration reduced. I found that really fun against Werewolf one time. Very useful against Werewolf one time. Also, his ability accuracy increase, which is not strictly against mutants, by the way. So I've taken Arcade against glancing nodes, used the pre-fight that increases his ability accuracy, and it's like the glancing wasn't there because your damage is only in red anyway, basically, so it doesn't really matter if his basics or specials glance because you're increasing the ability accuracy to place the debuffs anyway, and the debuffs are what's doing damage, right? So I think he has a lot of utility. I think Leader has more utility, but I think Leader's damage is much worse than Arcade's. So that's why Arcade is indecent. And then the next character on the list is going to be the exact opposite of Arcade, where Northstar is meant to fight the biggest health pools in the game. And not much else, granted. However, I do think Northstar actually does a decent job at this. I think he is a decent option for the Karina's challenge for only mutants in Necropolis. I do genuinely think he is a decent Necropolis attacker. He obviously rips apart that Hitmonkey fight in Necropolis, which that's the path you need to do. But I think he's not limited to that Hitmonkey fight. I think he's good for the Sauron on that path. I think he could be good for the Javas on that path. I don't have Northstar. Northstar is actually one of the few characters on this list I've never played, because I do not have the 7-star of him, and I didn't rank the 6-star. However, I do actually genuinely see potential in him. In his current state. Again, like Arcade, we have to rank them as they are now, and not what they're going to look like in a month from now, even though I don't even know what they're going to look like a month from now. But we obviously know like some of the mechanics they are going to touch in the rebalance period based off of the notes and stuff. So I genuinely think Northstar is underrated for both forms of Everest content, whether it's Autumn of Agony or Necropolis. I do think he is an interesting character, better than Arcade, and I'm hoping that in time he's going to be able to prove that. So he's going to go in decent, and we'll move on from there. Okay, so the funny thing is that the next character released immediately after Northstar, who released immediately after Arcade, so kind of ironic how that turned up. But yeah, Patriot's going to be the next character on the list. I hear a lot of people dissing Patriot. I do think that he is better than he's given credit for. I do think he is the best photon counter in the game, so that is something. Obviously, I criticize Sable for being a decent photon counter, but like being a photon counter sometimes doesn't matter when it's the only good science defender, right? But I do think Patriot is much better at fighting photon than Sable is. I do think he's also gonna work for Thing. I do think his reversal mechanic is really interesting. I do think his steadfast from when he's awakened is really, really good, especially as a skill character who I believe the entire skill class has no way of controlling Unblockable. There might be a couple niche things in there, but Patriot being one of the first skill champs who can actually control Unblockable, I think is really, really strong, especially for Path 4 and Alliance War, which, you know, you could send Kate Bishop to a lot of that stuff, but I do think Patriot is going to be the safer choice for some nodes on Path 4 and Alliance War. He actually has decent damage too. Like, I think his damage is undervalued for stuff in Battlegrounds. The reason he's not higher on the list is because I do think his utility is slightly limited. I did praise the Steadfast a lot, but I can't think of much else that he has. His inequity control is really interesting for war scenarios. But that's kind of it with him. He's just, you know, mainly a photon counter. Granted, I do think he is the best one, of course. And I do think his damage is pretty decent. And he's just going to go indecent, right? He's a fine character. He might get hit and rebalance. If he doesn't, I don't think I'm going to be that mad. But yeah, we move on to the next character now, which is going to be Serpent. Again, no defense ranked in this at all. So I have to rank Serpent based off of purely attack, and I think this is probably where he lands, which is pretty funny how a character like Serpent, who is designed specifically to be a defender, is a better attacker than Arcade and Northstar, and Destroyer and Leader. So that's interesting how that turned out. But, you know, this guy obviously shines mainly for Everest content, specifically in... Well, not specifically, because he does well in both Autumn of Agony type health pools and Necropolis type health pools. I say less so Necropolis, but I do think he's genuinely good for Autumn of Agony type fights. I've used him for quite a few of them myself on a bunch of different runs. Obviously, it just depends on the threats of the champion that he is fighting, but I think as far as cosmics go, he is really, really strong for long form. And that's just something that Cosmic is not known for, being a good class for long form content. So Serpent being able to provide that space that the Cosmic class needed is really important, and that's why he's in the decent tier. And then next on the decent tier, I think last on the decent tier as well, is going to be Dust. Dust gets scammed by what I like to call the Onslaught factor, where Dust is genuinely a good character, except Onslaught does everything you could ever need a mutant to do, so you don't use Dust. It's just annoying that Onslaught is that way, because he single-handedly makes every mutant champion look worse, outside of like a couple, one of which we're going to see later. And Onslaught hits Dust very hard, because I think Dust, with her utilities, and her immunities specifically, is a genuinely interesting character for Alliance War purposes. But because Onslaught exists and Onslaught takes every single skill on every single node in Alliance War, you're not sending Dust anywhere, right? Her damage is also decent. It's nothing crazy. Her damage reminds me a lot of Destroyer. But I think Dust's best quality is her immunities, and it just gets gimped by Onslaught because he's just better at it. Obviously, Onslaught has no way of controlling poison, and Dust does, but controlling poison isn't something a mutant character really needs to do. I think controlling Bleed and Shock and Incinerate are much more important in the mutant class, and that's kind of what Onslaught does. So, yeah, Dust is an interesting character. Unfortunately, just she has to suffer from Onslaught. So, yeah, we move on to the next tier, pretty good, and starting with Enchantress. This might be one of my hottest takes, because everyone I've talked to thinks that Enchantress is absolute garbage on attack. I genuinely disagree a lot with that. Enchantress is very, very strong for Eternity of Pain health pools, Necropolis type health pools at a 7-star rank 3 level. She's actually very good for. The reason I say 7-star rank 3 level is because in Necropolis specifically, she struggles very hard with Challenger rating. If you have a 7-star version, even at rank 2, when you have that extra Challenger rating, it makes a world of difference for her, and she can start soloing fights very consistently with the extra Challenger rating, giving her more time to ramp up, right? And that's her whole thing, is time to ramp up. That's what's making her a difficult champion to rank highly, right? She's very good for Grandmaster's Gauntlet type content, Eternity of Pain type content. She's not good for BG's attack at all, obviously. That goes without saying. In Alliance War, I think she has potential, but I haven't really been able to test it, especially with how much fight duration matters in this current war meta we're in. Not every war meta is going to be so focused on fight duration. Decay just simply is that. So taking Enchantress to something is almost throwing at that point. When fight duration matters less in war, I think there is genuine potential for me to use her for war type content. But we'll just have to wait and see, right? But I think she is very strong for big fights, underratedly strong for big fights, and she's a character you should just try and use, and I hope you enjoy it, because I think she is top 3 most fun characters to play this year. She is so fun to use. I love it every time I get the chance, and that is my favorite thing about Enchantress. I think my next placement is going to be the most controversial one on the entire list, and that is Spiral. I'm putting Spiral in pretty good tier. I'm trying to explain why I think that she is this low on the list, and I think the main reason is I think being a direct Serpent counter is just a cliche at this point, and it's a bit overvalued. I think there are many, many characters in the game that are good for Serpent, and we're just not using them yet, including 2 Mystics that have not been ranked yet. And I think that being a Serpent counter is what I think Spiral is just limited to. I think she's got an interesting mechanic with Destroy. I think her dancing blades are interesting. I think her damage is pretty decent. I just don't know what she's meant to do outside of being a Serpent counter. And she's very new, so she could very much go higher on this list. She's a character I've not played, so she could go higher in the list because of that. But I've not been impressed by most things she's been doing yet. And that's all I'm going to say on Spiral. I'm just not impressed yet, and I'm waiting to see something that's really going to wow me. And another thing, before I move on, about Spiral, is that I can see comments saying, well, if you think that Spiral being limited to Serpent countering is overrated, then why is Negasonic so much higher on the list? I'm going to answer that question when we get to Negasonic. I promise you. We're just going to have to wait till I get to Negasonic, right? So, let me move on to the next character. And the next character is going to be Bullseye. Genuinely underrated attacker. I think him being a direct counter to miss at all times, and then oftentimes evade and auto block all at once, is really strong. Because there's the playstyle where you just throw Bullseye's SP1 only, and you just counter, miss, auto block, and evade all at the same time. He also has this really nice killer instinct as a safety net. He has decent damage. It's nothing crazy. And it is a little bit less when your opponent's bleed immune. But he's a very simple character. And that just works for a lot of stuff. I think he can work on War Attack. He can work on BG's attack. He can even work for like Eternity of Pain type health pools. Less so, but I do genuinely think he's a better BG's attacker than we're giving him credit for. And the reason that he's not used so much on BG's attack is because of how strong he is on defense. It's kind of the same thing with Photon, where Photon is a really, really good BG's attacker, but you place her on defense almost all the time anyway, so you don't get to see it. And I think that's just kind of the position Bullseye falls into. I do think him being a character that relies on no buffs or no debuffs, or no buffs and no debuffs, is really, really good for a lot of nodes in Alliance War especially, because he doesn't need buffs or debuffs to do stuff. Kind of the same thing with Destroyer, except Destroyer just, I don't see utility enough. Bullseye I do, so that's where Bullseye's going. And then after Bullseye, we're going to be placing the character that I actually underrated the most out of this entire year. I was pissed off when Ironheart did not get rebalanced. Now I'm fine with it, because I see a lot more of her being useful. She's underrated for BGs. She's still nothing crazy for BGs, but she is underrated for that game mode. She is a very good war attacker. The best counter to Path 4 Dust, which is one of the most killing defenders on defense in Alliance War right now. She can handle Eternity of Pain type health pools pretty well. I don't think she's going to be very good for Necropolis type things. She's a very good quester as well, which is something I haven't really mentioned a lot yet. And Bullseye also would fall into that very good quester category. She's just a very good character with a lot of utility that I underrated. She has a lot of interesting utility that I just didn't know about when I was mad during a rebalance period, right? And then the last character going in the pretty good category is a character I do have a lot of experience with, and that's Spider-Punk. Spider-Punk, he's really interesting. He has some really nice rupture damage. That Discord notification was me, not you. I don't have a lot to say about Punk. I think he's a pretty good BG's attacker. I think he can be decent for war when he's in a tactic that allows him to shine. He's just a good character. Like, I think I have a lot less to say about Punk than I do most other characters on this list. He's good for questing because of how he ramps through a quest. He's good for Grandmaster's Gauntlet type content, Eternity of Pain type content. I'm not exactly sure about Necropolis. He's just good. Like, I don't have anything else to say about him, so we're going to move on to the next gem. Strong tier now. And the first person who's going to be added to that tier is going to be Beta Ray Billiam. So this guy is really good, which, you know, you probably heard me say that enough about characters now, but he's really good for every mode outside of BGs. In BGs, he's a little bit too slow for that, and he's not even that slow, it's just everything kind of dies around 60 seconds, usually not earlier, usually not later, which, you know, is good for consistency, because it means he can take a variety of defenders and just you kind of know exactly what the kill time's going to be. But the defenders he takes aren't really good meta defenders or anything. The tech class is not a great defender class of recently, so Beta Ray Bill he doesn't have a lot of places to shine in BGs. However, in Alliance War, I found him very successful for stuff in Path 3 that's really been troublesome recently. He's also very strong for Necropolis. He's very strong for like Eternity of Pain type bosses, as long as you can, you know, shock the opponent. If you can't shock the opponents, then yeah, he kind of feels kind of bad, but a lot of characters have weaknesses that are based on damage over time, so just kind of is what it is. But he's a very good character, and one that I think is being slept on a bit more than he deserves to be. Next up is White Tiger. This is a character that I have actually not found a lot of success with. I've played White Tiger in a lot of BG scenarios, and it just doesn't work out for me like I feel like it does for a lot of people. So she's kind of this high up because I know that she's better than I can play her for. Because like every time I use her, it just doesn't feel right. But I know this is a stronger character than from my own personal experience. Like I've seen people take her to Necropolis. She might not be like the best character for going there, but she can do some cool stuff in that content. She's a very good BG's attacker, and she maybe not very good for Alliance War or Necropolis. No, I mean I can't talk. Like Autumn of Agony type bosses. I don't think she's like the best for those, but she's still a pretty good character, especially in BGs, and one that I, you know, have not had a lot of success with, but I know she's very good for BGs. And another thing about White Tiger that is probably hindering me is that she needs the Deep Wounds Mastery to take Serpent in Battlegrounds, which is kind of a lot of why I ranked her. So because of the fact I don't own Deep Wounds, it makes her a lot less strong in that area. So it's unfortunate, but if you do have Deep Wounds, you can cook a bunch of Serpents, and even in War, like we've sent her to 42 Serpent before and stuff like that. So, alright, next up we're ranking Negasonic. I think Negasonic is going to be my pick for maybe the most underrated character of this year, and I don't even have her. I've sent her to so many things in Alliance War. She's been good for so many BG's metas of recent, for fighting Bullseye, for fighting Atuma. Like every skill champ, she's completely annihilates. It just might not be like the fastest damage, but she's just so consistent at countering the skill class. And in Alliance War, where there's like any node that is somewhat anti-onslaught, Negasonic is going to be there to be the best option for it. Because obviously, I say this all the time, Onslaught makes every single mutant in the game look worse. Negasonic is one of the few mutants in the game who can do some things, especially on the War map, that Onslaught isn't always as good for. So she's really, really strong for Path 7 in War. I send her to Path 7 usually more than Onslaught. She's very good for Atuma, Killmonger, Bullseye, obviously. We send her to 48 Bullseye over Onslaughts all the time as well. She's just a very, very good character if you like Alliance War, and underrated in BGs because of how solid she is for the skill class, which is one of the more troublesome classes for BG's defense. So, next up, we're going to be doing Jack-O-Lantern, not Dazzler, Jack-O-Lantern, and Jack, I think, is going to be the sleeper of this year. We haven't seen that much Jack gameplay out. I think he's a lot stronger than meets the eye. I think his damage for BGs is really, really solid. I've seen him take Onslaughts, I've seen him take Bullseyes. I think how simple his kit is just going to be really good for a lot of defenders out there. He's not going to be very good for like the cosmic powerhouses on defense like Maestro and Serpent, obviously, but why would he be? good for Cosmics, But yeah, Onslaught and Bullseye, I've seen him specifically take, which are obviously like 2 of the top 5 BG's defenders right now. And his damage coming from Incinerate and Poison can be limited, obviously. But if you're fighting a mutant champion, which is something he's very targeted to take with some extra abilities in his kit for mutants, you're gonna do Plasma instead of Incinerate, kind of the classic switcheroo that the tech champs do versus mutant champions, and it makes him like the best Onslaught encounter in the game. Everyone knows that that's kind of what Jack's whole thing is, but I think that unlike Patriot being limited to Photon, I think Jack is actually going to be better for a lot of mutants than just Onslaught. And yeah, that's one thing I just really like about Jack. So, all right, next up, we only have 5 remaining champions, and the one that I'm going to pick next is Shra. Shra is really strong. She has basically unavoidable damage in her wasps. The only way that you can really reduce the damage that these deal is via energy resistance, because they do energy damage. However, with the amount of vulnerability passives that Shra places on the opponent, any energy resist a character has really is like zeroed out, and you just do a bunch of damage anyway, right? She's one of the best serpent counters in the game. I think she's probably in the top 3 serpent counters. Really underrated at fighting serpent. I know there's a lot of mystics who have recently risen to the occasion of taking serpent, but I think Shra is doing a better job of that than a lot of more recent mystics. So yeah, I really like Shra. I like her a lot more than Spiral. I like her a lot more than White Tiger. Of like the 2024 mystics, I think Shra is the one that I've found the most uses for, and one that I'm most interested in playing for anything that I need like a generic mystic for, and especially on BG's attack. I like Shra on BG's attack more than White Tiger and more than Spiral for most cases. And I'm not even going to bring up Enchantress because she's not good for BG's attack at all, even though I love Enchantress. Enchantress is probably my favorite character released this year outside of like 2 other ones. So yeah, only 4 characters left. So these are the big 4. These are all really difficult to rank. But the one that I'm going to pick next is going to be Scream. Scream is a really strong Cosmic because of how her damage can be dealt with in the Cosmic class. Because Cosmic is known for a big orange, yellow, or even white numbers kind of class, Scream is very different in the fact that all of her damage comes from a large chunk of burst on her SP2, and she also has one of the easiest accesses to armor break in the entire game, which is very strong for Alliance War. It makes her like maybe the best Red Skull counter, which I think Red Skull is the best tech defender right now, and one of the only tech defenders that is hindering very meta Cosmics. Scream just tarnishes Red Skull. She tarnishes like Arcade. She tarnishes so many other tech defenders. And in BGs, it doesn't always matter because tech is not a very strong defender class in BGs, but in Alliance War, it's a little bit different, especially in this meta. She is one of the best decay attackers right now, which we don't even have one in my battle group, and I'm really upset with that because the entire first season, we didn't have a Scream to send to stuff. It was really disappointing, but I've like seen her take Gauntlet Vision and kill him before he can even drop the SP3, just because her damage is that high. Like, her damage is absurd. It's so good, and she's just a super strong champion. Not much utility to talk about. The only utility I want to mention is the armor up ability accuracy reduction in her Sig ability. I think it's really only reliable if you can get her to Sig 200, so if you're playing a 6-star, that's really good. If you're playing a 7-star, I think she is probably worth giving Sig stones to. It's a little bit iffy because, like, it's very niche what you want the Sig to do, but once you can get the Sig going, it's very strong for a lot of scenarios, so. Only 3 left. My pick for the 3rd best character of the year is going to be Prowler. Prowler is so good, and this is one of the few characters where I am putting him this high because of how absurd his utility is, rather than how high his damage is, because Prowler's utility of just power draining the opponent for any remaining power they have and then keeping them locked for like 2 seconds after their special is so strong in so many areas of the game that you might not even expect. It means he completely cheeses power reserve. It means that if you are fighting like power snack and you dex in the middle of an opponent's special attack, they're not going to gain the power because they're still locked. And it just lets you just roll the opponents because they're throwing less special attacks than they're supposed to on these specific nodes. And obviously those specific nodes are meant to be the threat of the fight. So Prowler in Alliance War is crazy. Any mutants that you might see on node 42 or 47, including Onslaught, note that Prowler is metal, but I still use Prowler for Onslaughts all the time. Prowler is just one of the best choices in the tech class for any mutants going on those nodes. He's also insanely versatile for BGs. He takes skill defenders better than some mutant champions do. I wouldn't say the mutants released this year, because I think the mutants released this year did a pretty good job at countering the meta skill classes threats, but some like older mutants were like struggling against like Atumas and Killmongers specifically. That's been a problem that's been solved a bit by mutants this year, but previously not always the case. And I think Prowler, having just like a couple non-contacts in his hits, being his heavy attack and his double mediums, just make him so viable for skill defenders, and it's a really, really good thing to see. So his damage is pretty good. It's probably lower damage than everyone in this tier except for Negasonic. However, it doesn't even matter because of how good his utility is. Like, he's one of the best war champs in the game right now, and one of the best or most versatile BG's champs in the game right now. And that's just Prowler. He's so good. So, two remain. Two characters I have a lot of experience with. I have not uploaded a lot on Count Nefaria, but I know I've played a lot of Count Nefaria, just not on YouTube. I actually just rank 3'd him yesterday as of the time of recording this, and holy crap, he's very good. And then Dazzler, who I also have at rank 3, and been making a lot of Dazzler content on recently. I probably have like 15 BG's fights that I've not even shown to YouTube yet, because I'm waiting for when I want to make a showcase on her. And she just nukes so much crap in BG's, it's completely absurd. So, I have to pick one character who I think is the best of this year, without Isophene or Deathless She-Hulk, of course. And if I have to pick one character who I think is the best, that champion is not Dazzler. I think Dazzler is number 2. And I'm putting Dazzler in Busted Champ. This character is stupid. There's way too much crap in BGs. She just does in a 1SP1, 1SP2, Onslaught, Maestro, Photon you might need double SP1, Sinister you need double SP1, but she takes those matchups very, very well. Killmonger, Bullseye, Korg, Atuma. If your Dazzler is even Sig 1, she completely annihilates those 4 in just, again, 1SP1 and 1SP2. And in comparison, like Negasonic, she does a lot of the stuff Negasonic also does. She just has better damage than Negasonic, and that's kind of why she's higher up. She doesn't have any anti-purify, but that's fine because she doesn't really place a lot of debuffs and can make her own openings without needing a parry stun via her Dazzling Dash attack. The Dazzling Dash attack also allows you to just run into special attacks. Like, I've tried using her for node 46 Mangog, and it actually kind of went well. Because you just run into his SP2 and then you falter the whole thing. It's completely ridiculous, and again, her damage is out of this world. Like, I've taken her for BG's fights, war fights, Autumn of Agony type health pools. I soloed the Prowler boss in Autumn of Agony. I soloed the Cassie boss in Autumn of Agony. If I had her when Jabari was around, I would have soloed that, no problem. And I'm sure she's going to somehow find a way to be useful for the Heimdall fight, right? So, anyway, this champion is completely busted, more so due to damage than utility. However, her utility against the skill class especially, if you can just get her even to Sig 1, which I'm just praying to God I can get my mutant gem for Dazzler soon, she's just so good. She's just so good. But I do think that she is trumped only by Count Nefaria, who I do think is undeniably broken. This character makes Leader like one of the worst looking champs in the entire game. Like, I'm almost worried that Nefaria is gonna do an onslaught where he just makes every science character look worse. Unless your science character can just nuke things in 40 seconds, Nefaria is gonna do like whatever their utility piece is meant to be. He has no immunities to Nullify, Stagger, or Fate Seal. He has no immunities to Neutralize. He still does gain his Dex buff. It doesn't even matter. Like, he just has so much damage. He has so much utility, and like canceling out healing, canceling out power gain, stealing that power gain for yourself. Really good damage for BGs. His immunities is also what makes Onslaught so good, and also what makes Nefaria so good. You take like no damage from Incinerate, Shock, and Degeneration. Degeneration is a really big one too, because I like use him for Mr. Sinister now, because you just bait the SP1, counter evade it, and then the degen on you doesn't even matter. You don't take damage from it. And I just don't even know what to say about this guy. He's so broken. I'm gonna have content on Count Nefaria soon. He's been a character that's gotten a lot of content on YouTube, but I'm gonna be doing that as well pretty soon, because now that he's rank 3, I'm gonna start uploading videos on him for sure. And yeah, he's so good for Alliance War, so good for BGs. Even with the unfazed mastery in existence, I still think he is that busted. He's going to be very good for Autumn of Agony type things. I don't know about Necropolis yet. I have seen Necropolis solos with him. Never mind. I've seen him take Wiccan. I've seen him take Dragon Man. I'm sure he can take other non-mystics in that content as well. He's just way too good. So, anyway, this is my list. The only unplayable champion I think this entire year is Silver Sable. I just see no redeeming qualities for that champion, and then everyone else is just at least decent for something, right? I've sent DViz to war before, I've sent DKG to war before, and I know 2024 is a year where everyone likes to spam the word mid on new characters, and as you can see, in my opinion, there are only 5 champions this year who are mid or worse. I think every character released this year has something to do, and that's really cool, and I really love that about this game, that even in year 10, every character has like a purpose for something. Even if it's not as common or as useful as some other character, there's a reason to rank them up for something, and it just means you can have fun. Like, you can always have fun with almost every character on this list, because there's so many different places in this game to take them to. It's just really good. Like, Enchantress, I use as the perfect example of someone who might not look great on attack to someone watching first glance, but then you take her into places she's meant to be on attack, which is long-form content, Grandmaster's Gauntlet, Autumn of Agony, Necropolis, and you just can have so much fun with the character. And I find that for a lot of the characters released this year, if not almost all of them. So, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. And if you have some controversial opinions, or you think some of my opinions were controversial, I'd love to hear about them. So, you can write that down in the comment section, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.